days after the government's unilateral scrapping of the UP-DND Accord, the PNP declares Barangay UP campus as a crime hotspot. In a statement, the PNP says the Commission on Higher Education noted the prevalence of drugs in the UP and the inability of the police force to address the issue.
How can we proceed kung ganito katigas yung ang ating administration, for instance, ng UP? Of course, you cannot prevent the Defense Department and the security sector from not doing their job because you're bent on pursuing your academic or what do you call this, autonomy.
Several provinces outside Metro Manila are experiencing an increase in COVID-19 cases, with some areas recording a positivity rate higher than the World Health Organization standard, and some provinces in the north showing patterns of increase similar to countries that are reporting cases of the new COVID variant. How should the government prevent a bigger surge in COVID-19 cases? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this special edition of The Chiefs. With me via Zoom is Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star in Port Area, Manila. Ami, kamusta? Ano bang headline natin bukas?
Well, apart from yung mga binasa mong mga lead stories, yung malaking sinusundan din dati, 10 business groups came out with a statement against charter change at this time. And apart from that, ito na nga, you want to dive into the story na yung UP, saka yung bagong variant, and pinayagan na nga yung mga 10-year-olds na lumabas ng bahay, pero sa MGCQ lang naman.
Oo, at saka parang umaalma yung ibang mga LGUs. Ano? I mean, I was listening to Mayor Chodoro kanina of Marikina. He has some real concerns there.
Kaya nga, no.
But okay, anyway, but before we get into our COVID stories, we'll jump straight into another topic. For now, we start with the Commission on Higher Education. Specifically, we have with us Chairman Prospero de Vera III. Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening from Bulacan.
Professor, first, let's take the take of Ched on this matter of the abrogation of the UP-DND Accord. You, of course, were formerly Vice President of the University of the Philippines. What is Ched's take on this? And your personal take, sir?
Yeah, I issued an official statement already this morning, and I said that I've been a faculty member of UP for close to 3 decades already. 5 years as Vice President, and now almost 4 years as Chair of the Board of Regents. And I asserted that the implementation of the DND-UP Accord was destined to be problematic from the very start. And that is the reason why all these accusations and contentions and attacks on either side is happening. Because the Accord does not have clear and detailed operational guidelines. It contains basic principles. But how do you operationalize that on the side of both the UP and the DND and the security sector? There is no clear operational guidelines, and the Accord talks of a joint monitoring group composed of representatives of the UP administration, regents, AFP, and PNP to regularly meet so that they can look at the implementation of the Accord and look if there are violations, etc. I don't think such a joint monitoring group actually exists.
Okay, Professor, 2 things there. No? First is, shouldn't it then therefore proceed from addressing what's already there? For example, that joint monitoring group. You were Vice President for so many years. You're chair of the, you're there on the Board of Regents. Napansin nyo pala na ano, then shouldn't that be the first simple thing to intervene on? Huy, implement natin yung joint monitoring group.
I raised this issue when I was chair of CHED about 2 years ago. But I was rebuffed even by members of the Board of Regents. I called for a review of the Accord. And they attacked me saying that I am trying to put, police forces inside the campus. I have been aware of this problem for some time. But the board did not take it up. In
No, but
fact,
let me take it to another level. I mean, not just the level of you, as you said, calling for a review, but your statement that this was destined to be problematic. During your time in the administration, in time, maybe you could give us some concrete examples of when the DND, state enforcement agents, whether the military or the police, went to UP and said, we need to do something, and UP rebuffed them and rejected them. Maybe, sir, you could give us an example of how problematic and how difficult it is, if there are, in fact, such examples.
okay, I'll give you an example. When you say that the UP campus must be free from any law enforcement agency to come inside the campus, I'll give you an operational problem. What is the definition of UP campus? Is it UP campus bounded by CP Garcia, Katipunan Avenue, Commonwealth, and University Avenue? Or is UP campus the whole UP campus, including 25 hectares of Cruz Naligas, all the way to the police station in Chicatuna, all the way to Arboretum?
Okay. No,
No,
good. I mean, good point. But let me just be clear. Are you raising this as a hypothetical, and you're asking us to engage you in a hypothetical question? Because you've said this is destined to be problematic. My question is, go beyond hypothetical. Give us a concrete example on when it was already problematic. Was it ever a problem when you were in the administration?
No, Lobby. It's not hypothetical. It is real.
Oh, so give us an example of when that question of jurisdiction became a problem for the PNP or the military to exercise its mandate.
What do you mean? How can it be problematic if both sides have different definitions? How will you determine whose position is correct if both sides don't have an agreed premise when they discuss? One side might accuse the other of not doing it, but you cannot determine whose side is correct because number one, there are no operational guidelines. Number two, there is no joint monitoring system.
I get your point. I'll just be quick about why I'm trying to. I'm not trying to stress any point, and then I'll defer to Ami, who has many questions as well. Ang point ko lang po is, meron po bang example? Because the DND is saying this is holding us back. And you're saying this is destined to be problematic. And our question to the DND and the police, and now to you, is we're open to that hypothetical, that it could be problematic. But if you could take this to a level beyond the hypothetical and say na, I remember nung nasa UP ako, halos isang dekada ako opisyal doon. Natatanda ako, naging problematic to. Can you give us an example of when this became an inconvenience and, in the word of DND Secretary, a hindrance to their operations? Just one example.
Well, you'll have to talk to the DND to give details because they are the ones saying that hindrance.
And that's why I'm asking the question, because unfortunately, DND has not given a concrete example of when, and you were UP Vice President and BOR member. So maybe you would have a better chance of giving us a concrete example, because DND has not.
Okay, I'll give you a concrete example. Who is responsible for enforcing basic law and order and police operations in the UP campus outside of the academic core? Okay, who's going to do patrols, for example, in Cruz Naligas and all the way to the area of the UP housing and the Arboretum?
Okay. Well, again, let me just say, I'll defer to Ami, but I'll just make my point. That's not an example. You keep asking questions. That's not an example. You said you will give an example of something that already happened,
Yes.
Or did not happen. What?
Okay. The police, the PNP is saying that there is an upswing of crimes and even drugs in those areas. Is there a mechanism for the UP administration and the PNP to determine who has responsibility for joint patrols in that area and for the apprehension of people who violate the law? There is a concrete matter.
Di ba kapag drugs anytime pwedeng pumasok ang pulis na.
Ang nakalagay, ang nakalagay nga sa accord, UP campus. And if you define UP campus, it extends all the way to the police station in Sikatuna.
Yun, ipapollow up ko lang yung question ni
Oh.
Rob. Is there ever a time na nag-request yung police sa UP administration na can we go in because we want to arrest these drug dealers or people doing drugs, or was there ever a time na ganon? Now, I want to ask you, what prompted you to call for a review to finish, di ba? Yun yung gusto nyo. You want to finish the agreement. You presented it to the Board of Regents. Was there any incident that triggered it? May hiningi ba at one point yung police na hindi kami makapasok dyan We want to arrest these people dahil may balita kami, may intel kami na may drug trafficker dyan or whatever crime is being committed.
Ami, it's not the UP Board of Regents that deals with that because the management of UP Diliman is under the Office of the Chancellor. So I cannot answer if there has been any request because the administration of UP Diliman is under the UP Diliman Chancellor, not under the Board of Regents. So you'll have to ask the Chancellor if there was such a situation.
Not even...
What prompted you? What prompted you to call for a review?
Well,
Any
number one,
particular incident, or you were just reviewing the agreement?
no, because there are statistics already and reports showing an upsurge in crime. Not in the academic core of UP, but in the surrounding barangays around.
Barangay mismo.
In fact,
Barangay mismo.
yes, in fact, kaya binakunan ng UP yung likod doon sa may University Hotel because there's an upsurge of petty crimes in that area. Alam naman sa loob ng UP yan. Even the houses, I live inside UP. My house was burglarized. My vehicle was destroyed.
Pero yung hinihingi ngayon ng DND, ang nirereklamo nila is not drugs.
Exactly.
They're pointing to communist recruitment inside the campus.
Well,
Did you ever discuss this also when you were with UP? Inisip nyo rin ba na it needs finessing as well, and the agreement needs an amendment to deal with this concern? Alam ko na matagal na tong concern ng AFP. Did you also discuss this with the UP officials?
Again, Ami, these are under the UP Diliman Chancellor, not under the Board of Regents. But I felt that the board should start discussing this, to look into gaps, to look into problems in operationalizing this. So I was raising it as a policy issue,
But
not an implementation issue.
Professor, you're also raising it as an operational matter. Let's go there. Why not address it on the level of operations? Why not address it on the level of the mechanisms laid down in the accord? Why go all the way to scrapping the accord?
Who told you I want to scrap the accord?
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that's your proposal. Let me reframe that. I'm asking in the context of what the DND said. You are saying, look, there are operational problems. Let's address the operational problems. Shouldn't that be the message to the DND?
No. The more fundamental problem is definitional, not just operational.
Okay, then let me be more precise. Then shouldn't the message then be to the DND, whether it's operational or definitional, wag muna abrogation. We can talk about the definition, we can clarify certain things. UP has said, and this is the message of UP President Danilo Concepcion, usap po muna tayo. Shouldn't that be the message? What we're trying to get your opinion on was the DND too rash in immediately saying that their only option is to abrogate the accord?
Well, the bigger question, Roby, is definitional, which you translate into operational. The whole problem of defining what is academic freedom first has to be defined. And what is the role of security forces in ensuring that the constitutional requirement for academic freedom and protecting students is framed within an academic setting. That is where consensus must be first met. And if there is consensus, then that is when you let both sides define the operational way of implementing the consensus.
But
I
when you
think
seek to define academic freedom, aren't you also identifying a point at which a slippery slope starts? When you look at the Bill of Rights of the Philippines, everything that pertains to our rights are laid down in terms of the negative. No law shall be made, and so on. We don't need to define our rights, certain rights, but what is clear is that no law shall be made abridging these fundamental rights. Aren't you going into a dangerous exercise by saying, define muna natin ang academic freedom?
But what is the other option, Robbie, if you don't define? At what point can agreements and operational guidelines be framed?
Yes, but Professor, this is where we get to the point of we're precisely trying to give you a fair shake here by saying, cite us when it became a problem, because to your point that this is something that hypothetically can be destined to become a problem, as you said, it's been here for 30 years. That hypothetical problem has never come up. It has never been a major issue. There have been so many secretaries of defense, so many regimes, so many governments, each government, UP students calling for their ouster, and no state, no government has ever felt so insecure as to abrogate this. This has never been a problem. That goes, the 30 years of history of the UP DND Accord weighs heavily against your theory that this is destined to be problematic. Wouldn't you agree?
No, absolutely not. That is your opinion. You're entitled to it. That is not my position. My position is in an academic setting, not just UP, but all the public universities. Rules must be defined within an academic setting on how to protect the exercise of academic freedom, how to ensure that the laws of the land are enforced, and how the interest of the students should be protected, not just in UP, but more than 100 state universities. And the core of it, and what everybody is raising, is the concept of academic freedom. Unfortunately, you have several definitions. There is a Supreme Court definition. There's a definition by some faculty members of UP. They don't agree.
Mr. Rivera, do you think an agreement is needed to define how security forces can operate within state universities?
Oh, yes.
You think there's a need for an agreement? Do you think this agreement needs to be salvaged or to be revived or to be discussed again? Or do you think it's okay just to scrap it all together because you think it's too vague?
If there is a meeting of the minds and there is consensus, it is easy to frame an agreement. If a consensus cannot be reached, then we have a problem.
But you think it's needed. You think an agreement must be forged to define the parameters by which security forces can operate.
I wouldn't go to that point yet because I will raise that point once there is consensus already on academic freedom. Again, not just in UP, but in all state universities. Because in other state universities, there are no agreements. And they also don't have problems. So we have to find out.
Are you planning to initiate this kind of discussion within institutions of higher learning that something like this must be forged?
Yes, in fact, I have started talking with some eminent persons who can start the discussions on academic freedom, and not necessarily in the UP context, but in the context of public universities. I started this actually about 3 years ago in some of my state universities already in Region 6. You can verify that. We've talked with the presidents on how you go about operationalizing these concepts. Again, I am not discussing this in the context of UP alone, but in all public universities.
So you are accelerating these talks because of what's happening now in UP?
Oh yes. In fact, I welcome this opportunity that different sectors are raising the issue. so we can start a serious discussion on the matter. I don't know if the Supreme Court and jurisprudence definition of academic freedom is acceptable as far as people from the academy is concerned. I don't know. We will find out. I don't know also if the old traditional 15th century definition of academic freedom, as some UP professors are posting online, is acceptable to security forces. I don't know. We will
Are you
find out.
planning to invite, say, experts on the Constitution, for example, to participate in this?
Yes. We will start with a smaller group and define what are the things that need to be defined. I think, Ami, my message is, let us lower down the level of vitriol that is happening, and let us discuss this in a more sensible matter.
Professor, we don't have a lot of time left. I just want to know, who are you directing that message to? To government, to the military, or to the academic community?
To everyone who is posting online and creating memes, and attacking personalities on both sides. I think everyone seems to want their 15 seconds of fame and demanding and accusing and making memes. This does not help come up with a good discussion and finding consensus.
Okay. Commission on Higher Education Chairman Prospero de Vera, welcome. Thank you for joining us here on the Chiefs. Please stay right there. The Chiefs will be right back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The OCTA research team observed a surge in COVID-19 cases in the provinces. Conversely, the increase in cases here in the nation's populous center was much less than expected.
The group says Zamboanga del Sur, Kalinga, and Mountain Province all recorded increases of at least 200% in COVID-19 cases after the holidays.
The reproduction number is about the same, more or less, right now. It will reach about 530,000. If it increases slightly, which is possible, it could go up to 540,000. If it decreases, maybe one or less than one, it could go down to 525,000.
We should forego any drastic policy changes as far as vulnerable groups are concerned. The focus should be on facilitating, expediting, making more efficient the deployment of vaccines.
Welcome back to the Chiefs here on One News. We are now in the final stage of our conversation. Joining us are Professors Guido David and Father Nick Austriaco of the OCTA Research Group. Good evening, Professor and Father.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Welcome back to the Chiefs, Professor David. As we always do, let's start with you. Give us the latest update from OCTA Research.
Well, the latest update is that what we're seeing is in Metro Manila, the trend is essentially flat. The reproduction number, although we measured it slightly greater than 1, it's 1.08, but overall the trend is flat, meaning that there's no significant increase or decrease, or it's not changing in either direction, so the caseloads are fairly constant. Okay. And it's also happening in Calabarzon. But what we're seeing is that the pandemic is actually hot in other parts of the Philippines, particularly in the northern provinces, and but we also include Cebu and Leyte to that list of hot areas.
Okay, and the other thing we always have been asking recently, now the R naught right now, that if I correct me if I'm wrong, that's slightly lower than the R naught last week. Does this already factor in the problems during the holidays? And at the same time, does this already factor in the recent big events like the Traslacion?
Yeah, it's factored in the holiday delay because, as we mentioned last time, testing was reduced by almost 50%, by more than 40% during the holidays. So after the holidays, the numbers shot up because we were compensating for the lack of testing during the holidays. But now it's been 2 weeks since then, so that has been factored in. But the translation, well, we have yet to see an effect of the translation on the numbers. It's been more than a week now since the translation, and we should have started seeing some increases. We're not saying that there's no increase. It could still happen, but right now we're not seeing it yet.
Well, now there's concern about transmission after the government allowed the 10-year-olds and up to 14 to go out of their homes, but only in MECQ areas. So that doesn't include us yet. But as you're saying, meron nang surge in provinces, in certain areas outside Metro Manila. And what are your thoughts on this, Father? They are saying we need to stimulate the economy further, and families can bring their children out, magkakaroon ng more consumption. What do you think of this, Father?
Well, I think, we as an OCTA team have been discussing this over the past day. And I think the consensus we have reached is that it's too risky at this time. So we are all about risk. And as Professor Guido pointed out, the pandemic is stable at 1. It's not increasing, it's not decreasing here in the NCR, though elsewhere in the country we're seeing spikes. The concern is that we can appreciate the government's urgency to try to stimulate the economy, but doing this by increasing mobility also endangers the stability of the pandemic. There is a D117 variant potential out there, and we're still waiting to see if it's going to impact our pandemic. If you look at Ireland, the pandemic in Ireland exploded in a 2-week period because of the 117 variant. So on Christmas Day, they had about 800 to 1,000 cases per day. And then by January 15th, it was over 6,000 per day. And so you have this rapid explosion. Something as similar has been seen in Israel. And so we tend to be very wary, and we would like to emphasize that we are taking a big risk in increasing mobility at this time when the pandemic is not below 1 in terms of the R0.
Other, the explanation of the IATF is that 10-year-olds to 14 are discerning enough to observe the minimum health protocols. What do you think about this?
Well, I mean, I have never had children, but I have been a professor and a priest, and I've had to deal with children. And the question is whether or not their parents are going to be there all the time in order to monitor them. So, there is a concern, especially in malls, because in malls you have a lot of people who are there. The elderly are present in our malls. And so there is a concern that by introducing children who are running around all over the place in the mall, you are going to increase transmission in the mall. So I know there have been suggestions, for example, if we allow them to go out, we should allow them to go out, but not into the mall. So if we are worried about them being cooped up at home, let's take them to a park, let's take them outside where transmission is low, but the mall is not exactly the best place to take them at this time.
Okay, Professor David, if we're saying that the national R0 right now is looks encouraging, it's a bit more stable, and also particularly in NCR, but that means that we're averaging out over some other areas that have higher R0s. What are some problematic LGUs that you're looking at now in terms of R0?
Well, in the national level, we're looking at it from a provincial standpoint, and many LGUs in these provinces are conceivably having problems. So what we're seeing is, for example, Benguet is having an increase, but it's not just in Baguio City, it's spread out all over Benguet. So we're seeing it in La Trinidad, in Mancayan, and Itogon, and they have a positivity rate of 20% over the past week, and that is very high. Then we also have Cagayan, we also have Mountain Province and Kalinga. And I want to note that, just like what Father mentioned, in Ireland, these places never had a surge over the past, since March. We're talking about Kalinga and Mountain Province. They never had a surge. Now they're having a surge. And the number of cases, I think it was mentioned that they increased 200% or something in 2 weeks. So that's problematic, and they have a high positivity rate, at least 15%. So those places that I mentioned, Cagayan, Kalinga, Mountain Province, also Pangasinan, and I think I also mentioned Cebu and Leyte as having an increase. Cebu was averaging, for example, just less than 30 cases before the holiday, and now they're up to 100 per day. And so that's a big jump. And Cebu's positivity rate is now at 5%. So they still have a lot of testing in Cebu. So as far as testing, they're okay. But they're reaching 5%. They used to be only like at 1% positivity rate. So Cebu is something that we should also be looking at.
Father, these spikes, and do they suggest anything? Is it safe to at least even hypothesize something with these spikes with regards to the variants here in the Philippines? We know that the guy who came home from UAE is now negative. The DOH keeps stressing that there is no evidence of local transmission so far. The count so far for B117 is still officially at just 1. But if you take all of these things that you're observing, what should our mindset be when it comes to the UK variant?
Well, I think one of the things that we were discussing in OCTA is we would strongly encourage the DOH to sample some of the viruses in these regions which are experiencing sharp spikes and sequence those to make sure that there is no variant that is driving, for example, the surges in the northern part of our country. with regards to the single 29-year-old Filipino who returned from Dubai, we are grateful that he is now recovered. The one question, of course, is how did his mother get positive, right? So we can understand how his girlfriend got positive. One of the things that's very mysterious, if you read the news reports, is that his mother has become positive. Now, there is no evidence whatsoever that he had entered the community at all. So he has not yet met his mother. And so hopefully what we're seeing is this is an unrelated infection where she got the infection completely independently of her son and all of the contacts. But these are the kind of questions that the DOH hopefully will provide an answer this weekend to reassure us that no other person in the Philippines was tested positive from this one case.
Well, considering the arrival of the variant and the further reopening of the economy, now they're saying they're planning to change the protocols for testing. After 5 days, you have to undergo. This is for arriving passengers. You think this is enough?
So I am actually leaving the Philippines to the United States this weekend, and I shall be back in a month. And I would like to go through a much stricter quarantine. So the Philippines is actually adopting a much more science-based approach by instituting that 5-day second test, because we know, for example, that it takes 5 days in order for you to build up enough virus for the test to detect it. So this is why, for example, the girlfriend tested negative when she landed in Manila, but she tested positive in the second swab. So that's a very good idea. One of the things that is not clear is what will happen if they test negative on the second swab. So will they be allowed to leave early? That would be a concern if they were allowed to leave early. In the United States, I believe that if you test negative on the second swab, you can shorten the quarantine from 14 days to 10 days. But it should not be shorter than that. So, and I'm still listening to what the DOH is trying to say. The Malacanang's explanation as to how that second test will change the quarantine requirements is not exactly clear to me at this time.
But you think 10 days would be okay if you have a second after 5 days?
So the best practices around the world, supported by the strongest science, is that 2 tests, 1 at landing, 1 at 5 days, both negative, and that you stay for 10 full days, pretty much will cover most people, if not all. So, it's good to shorten the stay as much as possible, but to make sure that we capture everyone that we have to capture.
Even with the variant, 10 days will be okay.
That is an open question, actually. So these tests were done, all of these studies were done with the current variant, the B1 variant. So the B117 variant, as I mentioned, talking to other people, there have been countries that have extended the quarantine for someone who has tested positive for the B117 variant from 2 weeks to 3 weeks, only because they're not sure if the higher transmissibility means longer incubation period. A lot of people are studying that now.
Yeah. Professor David, apart from the spread and the infection rates in the country, we know OCTA has also been monitoring the attitude of the public when it comes to the vaccines. There has been a rollout of vaccines finally in so many societies and many countries. Has anything changed in the perception, in the anxieties and the concerns of our people when it comes to all the vaccine candidates out there and when it comes to the overall notion of vaccination?
Actually, yeah, Robbie, we ran one survey for NCR, and I think we already mentioned before that we saw a negative outlook, or at least some people were not receptive to the vaccine at a rate of 28%, and some undecided at 47%. We're still in the process of rolling out another survey, but I think Father Nick could answer the as far as updating our survey, because he actually, I believe, ran a different survey based on his portal, and I'm not sure if he has results yet. So maybe Father Nick can jump in.
So my team at UST has deployed an online survey to address, to uncover the precise routes for vaccine hesitancy in the country. As of an hour ago, we have 6,700 responses from all the regions of the Philippines, and we expect to run this survey for another week. We are trying to get, so the original OCTA survey revealed this hesitancy, and so now we want to understand what exactly are the Filipino people hesitant about. And so we are using an international survey instrument that has been deployed in Malaysia and in China, and we're deploying it here in the Philippines so we can compare and contrast. So we should have that data probably by the first week of February.
Okay. But just to review, I mean, what some of the things and the salient points that you found in that baseline survey, are people apprehensive about vaccination in general, or just some particular vaccine candidates?
Yeah, I will take that question because although we did not ask the specifics regarding the reasons for their hesitancy, we did get feedback based on some interviews and some feedback online, and part of the hesitancy was the lack of trust because of the Dengbaksha incident. So that is one major sticking point. The other is there seems to be a distrust with vaccines coming from certain countries, and I'm not sure if I should be talking about this because I think Father Nick is also seeing the same results initially with his data. I'm not sure if he's ready to.
You're talking about Chinese vaccines.
Yes.
Father Nick, you mentioned that before, that in your informal consultations, you were getting feedback about resistance to vaccines specifically made in China.
So I would just say our interim data at this point has revealed that over 80% of our 6,500 Filipinos are deeply hesitant about vaccines made in China. 60% plus are hesitant about vaccines made in Russia. When we ask the 6,000 people if they have a preference, most of our respondents at this time will prefer a Western vaccine. And this is the trend. I mean, it's a significant trend, and we're trying to identify exactly why that is the case.
Father, you're going to the US. Are you getting your shot when you get there?
So I am not in an eligible priority group as of now. As you know, the vaccine rollout has been somewhat haphazard, and I am not expected to be eligible, given that I'm still relatively young and in good health, until May. So I will have to return to the States in May.
Yeah.
And I'm also excited at the possibility of being vaccinated here in the Philippines as well.
Can you choose? Are you choosing any particular brand?
Anything that is safe and effective and morally non-controversial.
Father, could I just ask you to weigh in with all your expertise in this or in vaccines? Also, in particular, a question that was raised to Health Secretary Duque at the Senate hearing. If you were vaccinated with one kind of vaccine, can you go for another with another vaccine? Does that increase your chances? Is that foolish? I mean, what should be what is the protocol there?
So I'm going to make a distinction in your question. If you're asking, can I take one dose of vaccine and a second dose of another vaccine, I would say no.
Okay.
If you say every year we have to get vaccinated, can we get a different vaccine? I would say yes.
Okay.
So
what about just being sigurista? And this was, this was, we have to say this was raised in the context also of the PSG, staff of the president, because precisely we don't know, and precisely because the president himself asked the question. If the PSG were already given a certain round of shots, both doses, and we still don't know, but just to make sure, would it be foolish or harmless for them to go for another kind of shot?
So once you have completed the first vaccination schedule, I mean, the question is, why would you want it again, right? So hopefully it's effective enough. Now the question is whether or not you can take it 6 months from now. Some people may be so paranoid that the vaccine did not take, and they will do that. In terms of your immune system, once you're vaccinated, the third vaccine that you take will just simply be a booster. And since we are going to be doing boosters every year anyway, it will be simply like taking a booster 6 months earlier than you were scheduled to receive.
Okay. Father Nick Austriaco and Professor Guido David of OCTA Research, maraming salamat po. Always a pleasure.
Salamat po.
Thank you, Robbie and Anne.
And that's all for this special edition of The Cheese. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, and we are one news.